Hello, you're listening to Count Richard von Coudenhove Kalergi. Today is Friday, the 22nd of February, and here's a couple of comments since my last video. At 4 a.m. this morning, Maisons Frontier announced that 116 people who had spent 36 hours at sea in the Mediterranean were forcibly returned by the Libyan Coast Guard to the port of Coms. The boat was carrying mainly African males. The Libyan Coast Guard would only have to do this a couple of times to get the message back to those still trying to make the trip to stop. Maisons Sans Frontières should be charged with people trafficking and is heavily funded by George Soros. NGO-sponsored charities are now part of the problem and not part of the solution, with enormous amounts of money involved. I once heard charity described as money taken from poor people in rich countries to be given to rich people in poor countries. NGOs also appear to be a tax-exempt vehicle to transfer taxpayers' resources beyond accountability and transparency. I'm reminded of an article from April 2012 in the Capital Research Centre magazine called "Bono Wants to Save the World, but he needs your money to do it." Through his not-profit Charity One campaign, remember that one with the actors and celebrities filmed clicking their fingers, advocated that poor countries are helpless and are victimised by corporate exploitation, and that the taxpayers of the West, to eradicate AIDS, cancel the debt of the developing worlds and end world poverty. The board of directors is filled with wealthy and influential people. In 2008, the One Foundation was at the centre of a scandal when it was revealed that the organisation had raised $15 million in funds from public donations, of which $185,000, or just over 1%, was distributed to charities, with more than $8 million going towards the salaries of the executives and employees. And yet, U2 moved its business operations from Ireland to the Netherlands, so Bono, who cares about the developing world, greedily indulges himself in the very kind of tax avoidance which is crippling the poor nations of the world. The Edge was also involved in his own bad publicity, who was planning to build 5 mansions on a ridge above the southern Californian town of Malibu. The Californian Coastal Commission strongly objected, saying that in the 38 years of its commission, this was one of the 3 worst projects ever put forward in terms of environmental damage. So the real issues here are both hypocrisies towards the concerns for the environment and in lobbying governments to increase their taxes, funding to humanitarian and relief, while presuming a strategy to minimise their own tax rates. How many times is this hypocrisy being replicated with other charitable organisations? In the UK, the Home Secretary Sadiq Javid has revoked the citizenship of the ISIS bride Shamima Begum after her much publicised interviews on the Times newspaper and on Sky News, where she described going out to ISIS and the forming of a caliphate under strict Islamic law with the same level of enthusiasm that Boy Scouts or Girl Guides attend a jamboree, and was completely unfazed about the crimes committed by ISIS on what they would describe the infidels or non-believers. Quran chapter 4 verse 24, all married women are forbidden unto you, save those captives whom your right hand possesses as slaves. This is the quote from the Quran that justifies the taking of sex slave amongst the non-believers or infidels. The ISIS concubine was only in Syria 3 weeks before getting married and was happy to be there, only wanted to come back because Islamic State did not succeed. She is an unrepentant radical who has witnessed the heads of captives left in bins and said that, to quote, there was one thing you have to remember, that their beliefs are that you kill the non-Muslim and you treat the Muslims good, and went on to say that she heard of people admit to being spies who could no longer prolong the torture that they were suffering. After giving birth to her 3rd child, her husband demanded that it be named Jera, after a Muslim warlord who, along with Muhammad, wiped out the tribe of Jews at the Battle of Khaybar in 628 AD, with Muhammad marrying the wife of one of the Jewish leaders killed, after he suggested to her that she convert to Islam, and she, Safiya, became one of his 11 wives, also known as the Mothers of the Believers. Sadiq Javid has shown courage in this decision. However, I hope that he is not just playing to the gallery. When he was appointed Secretary of State, he swore on the Quran, and that one day this man could be England's or the UK's first Islamic Prime Minister. And now for some domestic issues. Last Sunday was a good day for those with an ounce of common sense, and a setback for the Liberal left. Last Friday, I rang the Niall Boylan show and asked, would the topic of the second United Against Racism march on Sunday be a topic, and was it right for people from outside the area coming into Rooskey and holding a demonstration with none of the locals attending? The producer Helena said that they couldn't have time today and that she would ring me on Monday, which she never did. Little did I realise that Rooskey would become such an interesting event while watching Gran Torino's live stream. The behaviour of the anti-racism demonstrations was appalling, to the extent that I think that Gran Torino showed such calm that he has a future career in a diplomatic corps. There really is nothing more intolerant than a progressive Liberal. With the homemade signs made using crayons, they stood in front of GT, sometimes banging their signs off his head, and did their very best to stop him filming, all the while maintaining a cool head and refusing to respond to their hostile acts. They ended up making so much noise at their own event that at times you couldn't even hear their own speakers. The event appeared to be organised by Leah Doherty, who was the daughter of the ex-police commissioner Sean Doherty, and the person who authorised the phone tapping of 2 journalists. Another person called Izzy Kamikaze, who took film of GT while he was sitting in his van and put the registration plate up online, and who gave an interview on Shannonside Radio on the benefits of teaching to minors sex education involving gay, lesbian and transgender to children in primary schools. And then arrived Niamh Tierney and her niece, Frida, who stood for the community of Rooskey and blew out of the water any argument this rent-a mob of outsiders had pointed out, that none of the demonstrators were from Rooskey, and that the people of Rooskey were not racist, and that they were nothing but troublemakers who had been in the town the previous night and had been asked to leave from a couple of the pubs for annoying the people, and questioned if it was an inside job, which also brings to mind the motive for the fire and the question of who has a grievance and who would benefit. During the confrontation, Izzy asked the woman, "Do you want to be known as the village that ran us out of town?" Niamh has since appeared on the Joe Finnegan show, where she was awarded Star of the Week and spoke on Gemma O'Doherty's live stream. Excuse me. The other interesting story from last Sunday was a front page article in the Sunday Times regarding the failed asylum seeker and Social Democrat candidate, exposing her inconsistencies in her story, which claimed that she had studied in Bristol University between 2007 and 2010 before returning to Malawi after a failed asylum attempt in the UK. She then arrived in Ireland after 2011 and was granted a student visa until 2012 and applied for asylum in November 2011. In March 2014 she was arrested on suspicion of illegal entry to the UK and was brought back to Ireland in May 2014. This woman has appeared on numerous radio, TV and newspaper articles, and last appeared on the Matt Cooper radio show, where she lied about how she came to Ireland. I wrote an email to the Matt Cooper show on pointing out the inconsistencies in her story, especially the part regarding the direct flight from Ireland from Ethiopia. On Monday, Matt Cooper interviewed Mark Tighe of the Sunday Times and gave an article about the article, and later spoke with Shane O'Curry, who was head of ENAR, ENAR, one of 87 different NGO groups involved with racism in this country, who complained about the framing of the article and complained that the article used a picture which she was not smiling and used an unsympathetic photo. Cooper also mentioned the flight from Ethiopia and all the mistakes. This didn't seem to bother Mr. O'Curry, who would rather bury the story in the interest of preventing those on the right gaining advantage from this story. Yet again, another example of the dangers caused by NGOs. I know I have a couple of new subscribers this week. Thanks very much for subscribing. I look forward to reading your comments after my videos. Well, there are a couple of thoughts which are my own. Thanks for listening. Good night and good luck.